Imagine a moment where a country decides its future isn't just about economics or culture. It's about survival, not in the sense of bombs or bullets, but in the quiet, invisible world of data where control isn't just power, it's sovereignty. That's the reality France faced in 2025, when the winds of geopolitics shifted in ways that made one thing crystal clear: no nation could afford to let another hold the keys to its digital life. It started with warnings. The US under a new administration wasn't just talking tough. It was weaponizing its dominance, sanctions against international courts, threats to allies, the quiet realization that American tech wasn't just a tool anymore, but a lever. And France, like other European nations, began to ask the same question: what happens when the switch is flipped and the lights go out? David Amiel, France's minister, put it bluntly: the state can't just sit there and accept dependence, it has to break free, because digital sovereignty isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. This wasn't theory. It was happening in real time. The European Parliament had already issued directives in early 2025, urging member states to slash their reliance on foreign tech. And then there was the gendarmerie, the French national police, who had been running on Linux for nearly 2 decades, over 100,000 machines, all humming along without a hitch, while the rest of the world still clung to Windows. They weren't just using Linux, they were proving it could work at scale, saving millions in the process. So when France's digital leadership looked at that success, they didn't just see efficiency. They saw a blueprint. But this wasn't about cost savings alone. It was about control, about ensuring that no foreign government could cut off access to critical systems. No corporate giant could hold a nation's data hostage. The move to Linux wasn't just a technical shift. It was a declaration. France wasn't just reducing dependence, it was reclaiming its digital destiny. And the rest of Europe was watching, because in an age where tech isn't just infrastructure, it's strategy. The question wasn't if other nations would follow, but when the irony: this wasn't even the first time France had taken this path. Back in the late 90s, there was Mandrake Linux, French-made, French-driven. It faded like so many experiments, but the lesson remained: when a nation's future is at stake, you don't wait for permission, you build your own way forward. And in 2025, France did exactly that. You ever wonder how a country can pull off something as bold as ditching an entire operating system for its government? It's not just about switching software, it's about trust, reliability, and proving that something new can actually work at scale. And that's exactly what France did, not with some flashy new idea, but with a quiet 20-year experiment that's been running smoother than a well-oiled machine. Picture this: back in 2008, France's national police force, the gendarmerie, faced a problem. Windows XP was aging, expensive, and, let's be honest, no longer secure. But replacing it wasn't just about picking a new OS. They needed something that could handle the demands of law enforcement. Thousands of users, sensitive data, and systems that had to stay up no matter what. So they did something smart. They took Ubuntu, the stable, user-friendly Linux distribution, and built their own version, Genbuntu. And here's the kicker: it worked so well, in fact, that today over 100,000 computers across the gendarmerie run this custom Linux distro. Now, why does this matter? Because France isn't just talking about switching to Linux, it's already done the hard part. The gendarmerie success isn't just about cost savings. Though let's be clear, Genbuntu saves France over €2 million a year compared to Windows. It's about proving that Linux can be reliable, secure, and easy to manage at an enormous scale. And that's why when France decided to push Linux across its entire government, they didn't start from scratch. They looked at what worked: Genbintu's architecture, its ability to handle rolling upgrades without a hitch, and its focus on interoperability, making sure everything still works together seamlessly. The best part: Genbintu isn't some experimental side project. It's built on Ubuntu's long-term support LTS versions, which means it's stable, well-supported, and designed to last. Right now, it's running on Ubuntu 24.04, but the plan is to move to the next LTS release, Ubuntu 26.04, in the coming months. That's the kind of careful, thoughtful approach that makes big shifts like this possible. So when France talks about its French exit from Windows, it's not just waving goodbye to one operating system. It's saying goodbye to decades of dependency on a single vendor, and hello to a future where their digital infrastructure is sovereign, secure, and built to last. And the best part: they've already done the proof of concept. The rest is just scaling up what's already working. So here's the thing about how France is actually rolling out this Linux transition. It's not some massive sudden flip of a switch, no. This is a carefully planned step-by-step shift that starts small, but has big implications. You might remember those early reports about France replacing millions of Windows machines all at once. Turns out that wasn't quite right. The real beginning was much more modest. DINAM France's digital overseers started by migrating just their own internal workstations, around 350 machines. That's the pilot, the proof of concept. But this isn't just about testing. It's about setting a framework. By autumn of 2026, every ministry in France is supposed to have its own migration plan in place. No rush, no chaos. Just a steady, coordinated effort. The key here is that France isn't just swapping out operating systems. They're rethinking how digital tools work across the whole government. That means desktops, yes, but also collaboration tools, antivirus software, even AI, and databases. It's not just about running Linux. It's about making sure everything fits together, works together, and doesn't leave France locked into foreign dependencies. That's why the deadline isn't until 2027. They're not just replacing Windows, they're rebuilding something new. And here's the interesting part: France isn't starting from scratch. They've already done this before. The gendarmerie, France's national police force, has been running on a custom Linux distro called Genbintu for nearly 2 decades. Over 100,000 machines. They've proven it works reliably, securely, and cost-effectively. Now, they're taking that same approach and scaling it up across ministries. It's not a gamble, it's a tested strategy. But this isn't just about tech, it's about control. France's leaders have made it clear: digital sovereignty isn't optional. They're not just cutting ties with foreign vendors, they're building systems that work independently, that can be managed without relying on outside companies. And that's where the real challenge and the real opportunity lies. It's not just about switching software, it's about rethinking how government does business in the digital age. So here's the thing about France's new Linux desktop plan. It's not just about switching software, it's about building something that works at scale, something that's been tested, optimized, and proven over time. At the heart of this is Francios, which is essentially an evolved version of Genbintu, the Linux distribution. The French police have been running on over 100,000 machines for nearly 2 decades now. You might wonder, how does this actually look under the hood? Well, Francios is built on Ubuntu 26.04 LTS, the latest long-term support version. When it's released, that means stability, reliability, and a solid foundation for government work. But it's not just Ubuntu, it's a custom stack. France has taken Genbuntu's proven approach and layered in its own open source tools, ones designed specifically for public administration. These aren't just generic Linux apps, they re-optimized for efficiency, security, and compatibility with existing French government systems. The real question, though, is why does this matter beyond just being a Linux desktop? Because when you look at the numbers, the savings start to add up. The French police alone save around €2 million a year by running Genbuntu instead of Windows. If this model scales across ministries, the potential savings could exceed €40 million annually. That's not just about cutting costs, it's about redirecting public funds into other priorities like infrastructure, education, or even further digital sovereignty efforts. But here's where it gets interesting. This isn't just about dropping a new OS and calling it a day. France isn't just relying on the desktop, it's thinking about the entire ecosystem. That means centralized management tools to keep things running smoothly, especially when you're dealing with thousands of workstations. Solutions like ThinLink, which we've seen gaining traction in the French public sector, are part of this. They allow for remote desktop management, seamless updates, and better security controls, all without the overhead of traditional Windows deployment models. The key here isn't just the software, though it's the way France is approaching this transition. They're not rushing in blindly. They're learning from what worked before. The gendarmery's long-term success with Genbuntu isn't just a footnote, it's the blueprint, and that's what makes this shift so much more than just another government project. It's a deliberate, well-considered move toward digital independence, one that could set a precedent for other countries looking to break free from proprietary software dependencies. So here's the thing about switching from Windows to Linux in a country the size of France. It's not just about installing a new operating system on a few machines, it's about figuring out how to do it at scale in a way that keeps everything running smoothly, securely, and without breaking the bank. And that's where the real challenge lies. You've heard about France's move to Linux before, but now the question is, how do you actually deliver Linux to thousands, or eventually hundreds of thousands of users, without running into the same kind of headaches that made Windows virtualization solutions like Citrix or VMware Horizon so popular in the first place? Those tools were built for managing large numbers of Windows machines efficiently, with centralized updates, security patches, and remote access, all handled from a single console. That kind of infrastructure is what makes big deployments work. But Linux isn't Windows, and the tools aren't the same. That's where companies like ThinLink come in. ThinLink is a remote desktop solution designed specifically for Linux, and in recent months they've been getting a lot of attention from French government agencies. Why? Because it lets them do something that's been a sticking point for Linux on the desktop: manage a large number of machines centrally, just like the big Windows virtualization platforms do. Imagine trying to update security patches on 100,000 police computers all at once, like the gendarmerie did with Genbuntu. If you had to log into each one individually, it'd take forever, and you'd probably miss something. ThinLink lets you do that remotely with a single command. It also handles things like printers, sharing file storage, and even some basic application streaming, all while keeping everything secure. That's the kind of infrastructure France needs if it wants to roll out Linux without turning into a logistical nightmare. Now, there are still hurdles. Not every piece of hardware plays nicely with Linux, and some older peripherals might need workarounds. Then there's the training side. Government employees used to Windows might need a little help adjusting to a different way of doing things. But those are problems that can be solved, especially when you've got a system like Genbuntu already running smoothly for 2 decades. The beauty of Linux, though, is that it's flexible. You can tweak it, patch it, and optimize it in ways that proprietary systems just can't match. Thinlink isn't just about replacing Windows, it's about building a system that works for France, not the other way around. And if the French government can pull this off, it could show the rest of the world that Linux isn't just for servers or tech enthusiasts. It's a serious contender for the modern workplace. This isn't just about swapping one operating system for another. It's about something far bigger. France's quiet but determined push to rewrite its own digital future. One line of code at a time. Now, we've already talked about how France is testing Linux on government workstations, how it's been running smoothly for years in places like the police force, and why that matters for cost and control. But what we haven't dug into yet is how this move fits into a much larger plan, one that goes beyond just the desktop and into the very backbone of France's digital infrastructure. You see, France's Linux desktop push isn't happening in a vacuum. It's part of a broader strategy to break free from reliance on foreign tech giants. Think about it. While the government is switching from Windows to Linux on desktops, it's also making waves in other areas. Collaboration tools like Microsoft Teams are being replaced with something called Jitsi, an open-source alternative that keeps conversations and data under French control, even health data. Something deeply personal and sensitive is being moved to a new platform built on sovereign European tech, and this isn't just France acting alone. It's part of a bigger push across the European Union to create cloud services that don't depend on American providers. Now, some might ask, why now? Why is France making this leap after years of talking about digital sovereignty? Well, it's not just about saving money, though. That's part of it. It's about resilience. Thierry Carrez, a key figure in Linux development, once said something telling: a Linux desktop future may still come, but only after resilient back-end services. In other words, France isn't just swapping out the front door, it's reinforcing the entire building. The desktop is just the visible part of a much deeper transformation. Before you can trust Linux on every government screen, you need to know the servers, the networks, and the tools behind them are just as secure and just as sovereign. And let us be clear, this isn't some fly-by-night experiment. France has been doing this for decades. Remember Mandrake Linux? That was a French project born in the late 90s that helped shape how Linux was used in homes and offices. And then there's Genbuntu, the police's Linux system, running on over 100,000 machines for nearly 20 years. It's not just about switching software, it's about building trust. When a country's police force can run a complex system like that for 2 decades without major hiccups, it sends a message. This isn't just possible, it's proven. Of course, there are skeptics. Some say this is just another way for officials to spend public money without real accountability. But here's the thing: France isn't just throwing money at this, it's making a calculated choice. The numbers add up: saving millions by ditching Windows licenses, avoiding vendor lock-in, and keeping data where it belongs. And unlike past attempts at digital overhauls, this one isn't being done in secret. It's transparent, it's measured, and it's happening at a pace that makes sense. So what's next? Well, the desktop is just the starting point. The real work, building the infrastructure, the tools, and the systems that keep France's digital life running smoothly, is already underway. And if France can pull this off, It won't just be a win for one country, it'll be a blueprint for others, proving that digital sovereignty isn't just a dream, it's a reality waiting to be built.